I'm Parikrama, lead for policy at JPAL South Asia. As one of ASPIRE's earliest team members, it's a joy to see us gathered today to reflect on what the ASPIRE team lives every day, taking tested policy solutions to as many people as possible. This makes today especially meaningful because while Delhi's September calendar is always full of conferences and convenings, you've probably been hopping from panel to panel. This summit may not break that pattern entirely, but build on it. What we promise is to weave all those conversations together. We will spotlight solutions born out of years of experience and also bring forth unanswered questions that keep us going. In the spirit of true collaboration, I'll borrow a line from Sir Abed, founder of BRAC. Small is beautiful, but large is necessary. With that thought, let's dive into our first session. I now invite Ms. Shobhini Mukherjee, Executive Director, JPAL South Asia, on stage to open the India Scale-Up Summit with her thoughts on lessons from institutionalizing large-scale evidence-based systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Welcome to what we've been calling the first Scale-Up Summit. It's definitely the first Scale-Up Summit for JPAL. I don't know if it is for India, but we are very excited to be here today, to be spending the rest of the day with all of you, discussing how do we take this momentum to really to take to the next level. So for me, standing here for me is more of coming full circle. It's in a decade-long journey, actually 2 decades-long journey. JPAL has been my professional home for the last 18 years. And during this time, our work has taken us to the farthest corners of India, from Jammu to Tamil Nadu, from Tripura to Gujarat. And during this time, we've learned a lot. We've learned not only what approaches work best, to get meaningful change, but also what pitfalls to avoid as we're trying to bring meaningful and lasting change in the lives of people. I get asked a very deceptively very simple question. How do we tackle poverty? Is it through education? Is it through microfinance? Is it through employment? And good evidence has a very critical role to play to enable this shift. Without that, my honest answer, even with the evidence we have actually, my honest answer is we don't know. I could tell you 2,000 ways to answer this question, because that's how many solutions we have tested in the last 20 years to understand what works and what doesn't. And if you think about poverty, it's this big looming word that on top of our minds. Everyone's trying different ways to solve for it. But poverty isn't a single villain in a superhero movie. It's complex, it's multidimensional, it's a whole messy universe. It is structural sometimes, it's economic, it's social, it's emotional. And for a large proportion of Indians living in poverty, it is personal. So what we try and do at JPAL is and I'm going to talk a little bit about our work and what we do, because you will be hearing from the rest of the folks today on the scale ideas. But where has the evidence come from scale? And I want to spend a minute talking about how at JPAL we try and untangle these big, hairy problems into sort of smaller, testable solutions that we can test rigorously. Because for us, it's very important to establish a causal pathway to be able to enable that change, to enable that shift that we've been talking about. Some of the questions we get asked are, and we've asked actually in the last 20 years, is will improved cook stoves lead to health benefits? Intuitively, yes. Will microfinance create that entrepreneurship lever? Intuitively, yes. Will an AI-powered early flood warning system paired with community outreach improve disaster preparedness? Intuitively, yes. So at the outset, some things we think intuitively will work. We probably, especially if the policy problem is new, we might not know the exact answer. So at JPAL, what we do is we test these questions. We try and answer some of these questions with the same rigor as we apply to the medical field. So it's understanding in the most causal and rigorous way what works and what doesn't, which approaches are best, which approaches are most cost effective. And if we find things that don't work, understanding why something did not work, not just stopping at saying, let's move on from here, it didn't work, but really understanding the why behind that as well. Because I think for us, the principle is that before a big idea is going to scale, we want to understand why something works. Will it have that change? And by what amount, by what magnitude can we impact that change? Because if you think about it, if you're going to spend millions on trying to scale and tackle solutions to poverty alleviation, we need to check the label first. And we have found sometimes very surprising results when we have actually checked the label. We have found, if I take the cook stove example, that was my first project in JPAL. And my legacy in JPAL is that I have a lot of the research that I have worked on personally hasn't worked. So I don't want to jinx myself. I'm working on one program with Pratham right now. I can see Rukmini smiling away. But so I hope I'm not the jinx here. But the results often surprise us. If we take the cook stoves example, intuitively you think if you use improved cook stoves, it will lead to health benefits for the families who are using that. But we found that it did not lead to any health impacts. I can tell you many behind-the-scenes stories, but the simple thing that we learned was that families, this was not the most useful thing for the families at that point of time. The design was not what they wanted. Some families used a cook stove, some used traditional stoves, some used both. It cancelled out the health benefits. We learned a lot through this in terms of when we think about human-centered design, in the messiness of real-world complexities, which can unravel all neat theories, how do we get something to work? So over the past 2 decades, JPAL, South Asia, and JPAL globally actually has run more than 2,200 evaluations. In South Asia, this number is at about 250 evaluations across 20 states in partnerships with nonprofits, with governments, with civil society organizations, grassroots organizations. We've done this. Over 600 million people have been impacted positively by the scale-up of these evidence-based programs, as we call them. We learned a lot along the way. As the cook stove example is one of where what we thought worked didn't work, so it's a surprising result. We've done some work in microfinance, biometric attendance. There's a whole list of programs that we found that didn't work, and each of them we learned something new. Some of these evaluations also validated common sense, that if you give, and it's that intuition, if you give teachers a singular task of helping children catch up without overburdening them, we know that you will get the outcomes. But it's ultimately, these are not being done in a lab somewhere, in outer space. It's actually being done in communities, in villages, in areas where we live and work within. So it's a lot of it comes together when you bring in your best intentions, you bring in a whole range of people who are working with you. We have economists, we have implementing partners, we have governments, we have donors, we have academia, all working together to solve all of these various critical problems. And I remember Esther once telling us that you don't need guesswork to know what works in social policy. So this is pretty much, I would say, our intuition. So this is, when we think about evidence, it's not about knowing all the answers. It's more about building the right systems that ask the right questions, ask better questions. The method keeps us honest, it keeps us, helps us ask better questions, it challenges our assumptions. And then we need this entire community, all of you here today, to come together to really put your power behind generating that evidence and scaling based on what we know works, or scaling down on what we think doesn't work. And that's equally important. So today through ASPIRE, we are taking this vision to the next level. Together we have the chance to move beyond projects, move beyond programs, to really co-create an entire ecosystem coming together, and that's what ASPIRE has done in the last few years. And that's what even JPAL, that what we are trying to build is this larger community of actors who are invested in the long game. We need all of you to come here with we need your support. If you want to meet, if you want Viksit Bharat in 2047, if you want For us, I mean, in fact, I was telling my team, can I give them a very bold number in terms of what we want to impact? We have impacted 300 million lives in India so far. If I say, we want to impact 1 billion in the next decade, how can we do that? We can't do this alone. We need the power in this room to come together to align with us. So we need you to come with your curiosity, with your skepticism. We need to come with your imagination and your experience to help us chart the path forward. So I have also the task of telling us what we are going to be doing today. So I'll quickly run us through our agenda. But I want us our conversations to be honest, to be direct and candid in this room. And I'm looking forward to listening to all of you today. So we begin with Mr. Krishnan's keynote on what it takes to lead from scaling within the systems. He's been amongst many, one of our champions who's really taken the work for one of our core partnerships forward. I won't talk so much about it because he's going to talk about that. And then what are the trade-offs when we face that we are adapting and co-creating alongside governments? We have researchers and practitioners in the room, Noam Angrist and Rukmini Banerjee. They will reflect on bridging evidence to delivery for us. We have Robin Wilden, who will take us through some practical frameworks about when we think about closing the gap from research to evidence. We will hear from Shagun Sabharwal on what true system level change really means, and that's a word that we use very frequently. So Shagun's been at the forefront of that over the last 2 decades. We have Shankur Marwara, who's joining us, who will help us step beyond the development point of view of sector on scaling. Finally, in the philanthropy session, we have Amit Chandra and Shagun Sabharwal, Murugan Vasudevan, who will talk to us about what they see as the catalytic role that and a curious sense of how this community of funders, donors, CSOs, governments can come together, researchers, and can make scaling not just a lucky accident, but more of a repeatable process. I want to thank our partners, Vedis Foundation and others, for pushing us to think bigger and stay deeply engaged in the nuts and bolts of this work. This is the partnership that's really made Aspire a lot sharper and given us that not only the fuel to act, but also to think and be more ambitious over time. So today is not only about celebrating milestones, it's about reflecting, it's about learning amongst us and asking ourselves the harder questions. How do we finance sustainably? How do we adapt programs without losing their essence? The fidelity to the rigor is very, very important in this journey. How do we at the same time make scaling a repeatable process across contexts rather than one-off success stories? So that's the spirit of Aspire, and I invite you to deliberate with us for the rest of the day. Thank you. And now I'm going to invite my colleague, Iqbal Dhaliwal, to talk about our scale journey. So for those of you who don't know Iqbal, he's not only the Global Executive Director for JPAL, he's also a former civil servant and who started his career thinking about exactly these questions. So I do invite Iqbal to come and take us forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Shobhini, and a very warm welcome to all of you. There is almost like kind of two opposite words in this particular title, India and scale up. You might wonder why anybody in India needs to be told about scale. Everything in India is at scale, whether it is, even going in my U special in DTC buses, we were at scale because there was not one more person you could fit into that bus. And so kind of as Indians, we actually know a lot about the challenges of doing things at scale. But I think this summit is not about numbers. This summit is about reaching those hundreds of millions of people and still having the confidence that what we are actually making a difference in their lives. The outcomes that we set out to achieve are being achieved in this process of scale. And we're not just going home saying, oh, I used to reach 10 million people, or I reached 100 million people, or this program actually reaches 1 billion people, but we know it's actually having an impact. So I think that bit is really important. So then you might wonder, what does a research center, which was started at MIT's economics department, which has a bunch of economists, got to tell you about that? So way back in 2009, when I was hired by Abhijit and Esther, I think the answer would have been, we actually have nothing to say about scale. There is a very strong underlying assumption among young researchers that my job is to do fantastic research. And if I do good research, if I do meaningful research, it is up to the rest of the world to kind of take it and adapt it in their programs, whether it's in biomedical or it's in engineering or it's in health or it's in education. And that was the time when J-PAL was about 6 years into this whole thing. And there was an increasing realization that even though we are producing all this very effective work, it's not really turning into actual decisions by policymakers. And so that's where the journey of the policy group began. I came and helped found the policy group with this one single mission: how do we take evidence to policy? So kind of what has been the overall lessons? Since I have the word global in my title, I'm going to try and make this a little bit less about India and less, kind of what are the dots that were connected around the world. So our first intuition was that maybe what we just need to do is to take this really, really good evidence that we are generating and bring it into the hands of the policymakers. So the first lesson was, oftentimes there are policymakers out there who are looking for great solutions. They're not closed-minded. They have nothing against evidence. They just don't have access to the right evidence. And so, we created a policy group. We put boots on the ground. We started going out, and a bunch of fantastic things happened. I remember in 2009, Aparna, who's sitting here, and I went to Bihar, and we created, a whole conference. And one of the main things we pitched was deworming, because that was a big problem in Bihar. Bihar became one of the first states in India to do school-based deworming at scale, reaching tens of millions of children, not once, but multiple times in the cycle, and doing so with fidelity. So we learned a lot through that. Teaching at the right level became another one of our projects together, doing that. And then the third one was targeting the ultra-poor. So that was the first part. Now, as the journey began in some of the other countries in the world, we started realizing that oftentimes there are these small constraints that come in the way of policymakers scaling up things based on fidelity. And so this is where my North America office came in, which serves the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And they created what is called the State and Local Initiative. And the whole point was that there are policymakers out there, but just for the lack of a few tens of thousands of dollars to do a pilot or use administrative data to understand what the underlying problem is, or because they just don't understand how you could randomize and how would you respond to a politician when he says, how can you randomly allocate resources? You could get over these constraints through a little bit of training, a little bit of seed money, and hence the State and Local Initiative was born. And we said, okay, intuition number two, sometimes you don't need a lot of money. Sometimes all you need is a little bit of money to kind of make this all work. And again, a bunch of things happened with that. And then our third intuition came through teaching at the right level in Africa. Pratham had done an absolutely fantastic job of scaling up teaching at the right level in India. And then when we would go to Africa and we would go to Latin America, we would see all these contexts where it was exactly the same problem: teaching to the syllabus, teachers trying to do their best but not understanding what is the learning outcome gap and how do you bridge that gap. And along with Rukmini and Madhav, we partnered with Co-Impact. Shagun is here as well, Rukmini is here. We partnered with Co-Impact. A bunch of money was crowded in, and we said we need to tackle the system level changes here, not just the small problems, and very context specific. What's happening in Zambia is very different from what's happening in Cote d'Ivoire on the ground, even though the underlying problem is the same. So that was our third intuition, that you need to often crowd in a huge number of partners who have an understanding of the local context, the resources, and the wherewithal to take it out. The fourth context kind of intuition came to us from Indonesia, which was that oftentimes you can do all of these things in a systematic way, but some of the biggest wins can come from small policy windows. So Indonesia was trying to reduce their fuel subsidies because it was really killing their fiscal deficits. And at the same time, they wanted to make sure there was not an upheaval. And so they said we need to strengthen our food subsidy program. They have very much like our ration programs, they have a targeted distribution of rice. And when we got that phone call in Cambridge, we were able to quickly go look at the administrative data, look at some of the intuition from research, and quickly put together a pilot program on on these cards, which became the bedrock of the reform program. And so that was kind of the fourth intuition, that you can do all of these things and keep waiting for all these things to happen, but oftentimes in the end, these small things absolutely matter. The fifth intuition actually came from the work that we started here in Tamil Nadu, which was, what is the holy grail that we are actually working towards? Is it we want to scale up one program in Odisha and another program in Andhra Pradesh? We want to scale up targeting the ultra poor, and we want to scale up deworming. But then what happens when Jaypal is not there? But more importantly, what happens when the policy champion on the ground gets transferred? I'm in the Indian Administrative Service, and used to be. Unfortunately, the lifespan of an IS officer is somewhere between 18 months to 2 years. So you can get these incredible champions on the ground, but then what happens when they get transferred? So the fifth thing that intuition that came was, this is not about scaling up one program. It's not even about scaling up 10 programs. It's not even about working with 7 departments in Punjab or in Tamil Nadu. But it is about changing the culture of how decisions and policies get to be made. It's about institutionalizing this particular culture. And that requires making sure that there's an MOU in place which outlives people. You have empowered and you have brought in a coalition of people, that it's part of the budgeting process, hugely important, like the arcane rules of budgeting. If you have one sentence which says, before a program above 1 crore rupees can be approved, you must show evidence, which is what we were able to do in the case of Tamil Nadu, or completely changes the culture, because then anytime a new program is happening, you have to work on it. And, Aparna spent weeks and if not months kind of sitting there in those arcane rules trying to make that happen. So that was kind of the fifth intuition. So I could keep going on and on, but somebody once told me that, the people remember only 3 things. If you add some jokes, they might remember 2 more. So we are now at 5, so I'm going to stop there. But I think I just wanted to say that oftentimes people think of Jaypal as a pioneer in research and in RCTs. But what they forget is oftentimes that, way back in 2009, when this whole journey of evidence to policy, evidence to scale started, there are not too many research centers which were thinking about scale and policy and all of the and how are we making sure we are reaching the last mile. And this has been a long journey of learning, not just from India but from many contexts. So what is kind of the one theme that kind of combines all of these 5 things, the one ring to combine all the rings, and that is all of you in this room. It's the people who, like the first is the staff, the incredible staff of Jaypal South Asia. Guys, give yourself a hand. You guys are these are the people who are in the weeds. I have been with them. I have personally sat for like 6.5 hours outside the offices of secretaries of government who didn't want me to keep me waiting, but they start a meeting, they're called by the minister, then they get 3 calls because some union guy wants to transfer 1 teacher, then they have to rush because there is some action happening. You have to do so much shoe leather. You have to be persistent. You have to have patience, and most importantly, you have to have a commitment. So the team is just incredible. I want to thank our funders, and there's this fun story about meeting Vikrant, which is he had invited me to London, and finally I went to meet him. I had 2 agendas on that day, try and convince Vikrant that, Jaypal is an organization worth looking at, and try and set up my Egypt office. And I'm in the taxi, the black taxi from Heathrow to my hotel, and I turn on my phone because it was turned off and I had forgotten to turn it on, and boom, 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 like 100 text messages come. Congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. Abhijit, Esther, and Michael have won the Nobel Prize. So I think it was a fun day, and on which Vikrant and I launched this partnership, or at least started talking about it. Now, if you think you need to win a Nobel Prize to get a donor on board, you don't, because the reason Nick is sitting here is because kind of 2.5 years ago, I had the great privilege to meet Erica and Firoz in Singapore, and there was no Nobel awarded that day, and they're still on board. So I think this is a little bit about substance rather than just awards. So thank you so much for being part of this journey. Really, really looking forward to this. And what you bring is not just resources, not just vision, but most importantly, a commitment to be in the weeds with us. Murugan is, I think, as much a J-Parler now as anybody else is, and unpaid though, so that's great. We need more like you. And so just that being in the weeds and trying to help solve the problem is really important. And finally, I would just say hats off to our implementation partners. You stand up against, Smriti is here, and you stand up against the immense pressure to show results yesterday, not tomorrow. The immense pressure to say कि आप एक ही गांव में क्यों कर रहे हो यार, पूरे ज़िले में करो, और आप 10 ज़िले में क्यों कर रहे हो, आप पूरे प्रदेश में क्यों नहीं करते, और आप एक प्रदेश में क्यों कर रहे हो, नेशन वाइड अनाउंस कर देते हैं, right? So there is that pressure. There is this pressure of data कैसे हम share करेंगे? How can we share the data? This data is so proprietary. You stand up the pressure of saying, how can we transfer 10 lakh rupees to this institution? We have not issued a call for proposals, or kal finance wale audit laga denge. We see one Smriti and say, okay, why is she not moving this thing faster? What we don't know is that she's navigating 100 other, people who have their constraints. So thank you for the implementation partners. All of you are what makes this thing tick. So I think that's a nice segue to one of my favorite implementation partners, Mr. Krishnan. He was among my first bosses in the IAS. I was posted deep down south in Tirunelveli. He was in another district called Virudnagar. And way back, we formed a bond. And then when he became the planning secretary of Tamil Nadu, the two of us said, we are going to start a partnership together, but this partnership is not going to be about one project. It is not going to be about one department. And now that partnership, has been across dozens of projects in 9 different departments, and has just celebrated its 10th anniversary. So with that, I would like to, he could not be here because he was asked to go for the ANGA meeting at the last minute, but he's recorded a video, so love to hear that. So, and once again, thank you so much for coming here, and most importantly, for partnering with us in this journey. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. Let me at the outset apologize for not being able to be present here with you in person. I normally live in Delhi, work in Delhi, but this week I've had to travel to the UN General Assembly meetings in New York, and therefore I'm away from Delhi. Let me thank JPAL South Asia, specifically Iqbal and Shobini, for having me here this morning. Iqbal, of course, has been a very long-standing friend of almost 30 years. But more than that, I think a lot of my own engagement and Tamil Nadu's engagement with JPAL started with a chance meeting in about 2010 or 11, when we spoke about the kind of work that he was doing in JPAL, and we wanted to see how that could be replicated back in India once I went back from the IMF to the state government of Tamil Nadu. And much later, I picked up the threads and started a conversation with Iqbal sometime in about 2013, when I joined as the Secretary for Planning and Development in the state of Tamil Nadu. And it was an extremely interesting experience to see how we could apply data and evidence to the way in which decisions are made and the way in which government plans its interventions, its schemes, its programs, and its projects. Part of it lay from prior experience. India used to receive assistance from a range of Nordic countries and other smaller agencies in the 80s and the 90s. And that basically meant that you had small projects which would get funded. And if the ideas were good, and if there was a development approach there which could work to scale, then you went to the larger aid agencies, like you went to the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank and got it funded at scale. And this has been a history of the various development interventions in India, and specifically in the state of Tamil Nadu. Somewhere in the 90s, funding from other sources dried up, and we were at that point in about 2013-14, we were looking at ways in which we can actually support innovation, we can support newer approaches, we can support an approach where we actually look at what has worked at a smaller scale, what has worked in terms of what the data and the evidence suggests, and then scale it up. And then the conversation started, and I remember at that time, there was this young person, Jasmine Shah and Aparna and a whole host of others who would have periodic interactions with us, and we worked on this overall approach of how this could work. And there were steps which we laid down, and we institutionalized the entire approach. The institutionalized approach was basically that initially there would be a policy dialogue with the respective ministries and departments in the government of Tamil Nadu, which would identify the kind of questions that the ministries and departments had and which they wanted to be answered. If JPAL, through its network of researchers across the world, could answer those questions based on experience of what they had tried elsewhere, then that would be picked up and we would see whether that would work. If not, then we would try and see whether we could do some experimentation to scale to figure out a way forward and how we could approach the problem. And that was one part of it. The second part of it is that once we identified that there would be an intervention, what is popularly what the JPAL themselves and others in development literature call the golden standard of an RCT, a randomized controlled trial. If we came to that stage of a particular intervention, then we set up a mechanism by which the whole thing would be approved within the governmental system. There were funds for this kind of experimentation which were carved out of various government programs for evaluation and for monitoring, and that was used for the purpose of supporting government's costs. The agreement of understanding with JPAL, and we entered into a detailed MOU, was that the costs of the principal investigators who came from various parts of the globe was met by JPAL, whereas the cost of the actual survey which would be done in the field was met by the government. So there was a clear way in which this was allocated. There was a process of 2 levels of committees which would evaluate and approve these interventions, and there was also a political buy-in as a result. All of this was folded into the Memorandum of Understanding, which incidentally was signed in Chennai sometime in 2014, before the then Chief Minister. And I recall that ceremony where Shobhini was actually signing that agreement, and I was signing on behalf of the government of Tamil Nadu, and Esther Duflo was attending that event. I recall having introduced her because there was no other way to explain to the then Chief Minister as to how significant an economist Esther Duflo was. So the only thing I could remember to tell him is that, sir, one day she will win the Nobel Prize. And this was in 2014, and she won it in, I think, 2019. So that was how this entire engagement started. And we did this whole series of projects with JPAL. At a point, I recall that we were doing about 20 different projects and engagements across different ministries and departments. And that is something which got sustained because we had this framework. There was a framework of how you actually interact, a framework of what you scale up, and once you scale up, how you fund it. And all of that was put into place in the government system. And I'm very glad to learn from colleagues both in the government of Tamil Nadu and from friends in JPAL that this is a mechanism which is continuing to work, and it's a mechanism under which many new interventions are being taken up for a scaling up. And I can honestly tell you that there are 2 or 3 things which stand out in this. There were some where we did studies and we sort of moved forward, And those studies then got converted into full-scale programs in the way that we addressed anemia, in the way that we addressed non-communicable diseases, in the way that we address early childhood education. All of these were issues which could take up. There was another scheme about exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months. So various programs of this nature which got taken up and moved forward. There were others which were at that point sounding completely outlandish, but later became something which is part of development literature. There was a very interesting study which we call the sleep study, that how deprivation of sleep for the poor actually affects their cognitive capacities and earning capacities. By that time, I had moved to the to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I was responsible for what was then called the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board. And it interested me enough to actually do this study in one of the urban slums in Chennai, and the findings were extremely interesting. And this, in some ways, was probably my favorite study of all the 20 odd that we did with JPAL. And there were other things where they contributed significantly to our understanding of the subject and helped to decide policy. I recall there was a sudden push saying that in Tamil Nadu we should introduce prohibition on liquor. And what is the way forward and how can we do it? And there was this consternation saying, there's a huge revenue implication, there are so many other problems, and can we actually do it? How do we do it? Will it work? Won't it work? I requested friends in JPAL to give me a quick international literature survey on what has worked and what has not worked. And they brought out some very interesting examples from Latin America and elsewhere, including in the 30s in the United States, as to what the problems were with prohibition and so on. Putting all that literature together, putting all the data together, we could make a compelling case to the political executive in Tamil Nadu saying that an outright prohibition will not work, but you could try graded methods of reducing the hours for which liquor shops would be opened, reducing the number of liquor shops, choosing locations of liquor shops carefully, and so on. So we were able to influence policy based on the kind of research input that we received. So clearly, this is an extremely effective way of doing this work, and I found that even subsequently, even in my present assignment as Secretary in the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, the work we are doing on AI and how AI can be adapted to the good of humanity. And let me take this opportunity to make a plug, because JPAL is also associated in the preparations for the AI Impact Summit, which is to be hosted in Delhi in February 2026. And that is a key event that we're doing now in association with JPAL, which again looks primarily at data and various other things. And let me also tell you that JPAL didn't stay uninfluenced by what we tried in Tamil Nadu. JPAL was basically an RCT organization, and we finally convinced them to actually do a multi-wave long-term study. And the study for the elderly, which is I think now into its third wave, was something that they took up. And it was a kind of an agreement or understanding that we had, saying that these two things are something that you will do. They also helped us set up a data analytics unit, which was in some ways the kernel of the idea of their own idea later, which I think they established. So there are multiple ways in which I think we influenced each other in terms of how their experience in Tamil Nadu influenced this. And we also got them to do a lot of capacity building work for us. Training people in the evaluation department, training people in the statistics department and other departments, which probably they wouldn't have done otherwise. But that, I think, capacity building is something that they realize needs to be done. So I think their experience in Tamil Nadu has also influenced the way that they have practiced their craft elsewhere in the world. And I can honestly tell you that the state government of Tamil Nadu benefited substantially and continues to benefit substantially from this engagement and the way in which it has really played out over the years. I wish this particular conference the very best. I think we need to continue to work towards data-based, evidence-based policy making as opposed to a seat-of-the-pants policy making approach. And clearly, this is an approach that needs to continue to grow. Practitioners need to continue to work harder on this and keep at influencing policymakers to adopt it significantly more. That is work that you need to do as you go along. Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. I'd like to invite my colleague Arishi to felicitate Iqbal and Shobhini with the mementos. If you could.
I have to tell my North America colleagues to do more of this. Nobody does this in America.
It's also my pleasure to welcome my colleague Dakshta, who will walk us through the remainder of today's events. Thank you.
Thank you, Parikrama, and once again, a big thank you to Iqbal, Shobhini, and Mr. Krishnan, who joined us virtually for setting the stage so thoughtfully for today's conversations, proving that great insights don't require great Wi-Fi. I'm Dakshta, Manager Communications at JPAL South Asia, and I will be your guide through a part of today's journey. The first session really set the tone, reminding us that scale is not a choice, but the default, and showing us the lessons, the challenges, and the opportunities of taking evidence to action. Now, as we delve deeper into today's conversations, at different points during the day, we will be spotlighting projects that have scaled up with Aspire's support. Projects that you will also get to closely experience at the Aspire Experience Center. Think of this as the trailer and the Experience Center as the full film. To kick us off, let me share something an 8th grade student in Punjab once told me on a field visit. When my little brother gets older, I want to make sure he understands that household chores aren't just something that girls do. It's important for everyone, boys and girls, to help around the house. I'll show him that sharing responsibilities is the right thing to do. That one simple sentence captures what the gender equity curriculum developed by Breakthrough is all about, reshaping how adolescents see gender roles, aspirations, and equality. After all, adolescence is that unique window when identities and worldviews are still taking shape. Through the efforts of Aspire, Breakthrough, and committed governments, this curriculum is now being scaled across 4 states, with Punjab and Orissa, and with headroads into Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and one union territory, Daman and Diu, now reaching 3.8 million boys and girls. And now, based on this success, the focus is shifting to contextualization, fidelity, and ensuring governments can sustainably carry forward both implementation and monitoring. As a first step, we're proud to launch the Common Minimum Monitoring Framework developed by Aspire to help governments maintain quality and consistency as they take this step forward. Can we get a huge round of applause for all the partners, staff, and teams that have worked tirelessly to bring this program to where it is today? You can also access the Common Minimum Monitoring Framework on the Aspire microsite and also experience it at the Experience Center. And that brings us to the center of today's exploration. What does it really mean to scale up? Not just in theory, but in the messy, complex, almost exhilarating reality of Indian development work. But before I invite our panel to the stage, let's make this interactive right from the start. Take a quick look around you. How many of you are currently working on scaling a solution? Whether it's your very first step beyond a pilot or your 15th state rollout. Could I please see a show of hands? Wonderful. That's exactly the energy we want in this room today. People who know firsthand how rewarding and sometimes just how challenging scaling can be. It's going to be a lively, interactive session with polls, audience inputs, and plenty of space to reflect together. And just as a quick housekeeping note before we begin, please keep your phone handy for the live polls. It is my pleasure to now invite on stage our moderator, Murugan Vasudevan, Chief Executive Officer, Vedis Foundation, along with our distinguished panelists, Ms. Smiti Sharan, Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Rural Development, Mr. Mangal Pandey, Chief Executive Officer of Key Education Foundation, Shobhini Mukherjee, Executive Director of JPAL South Asia, and Sunita Menon, Chief Thematic Officer as Breakthrough. Please welcome them with a huge round of applause. Murugan, the floor is all yours.
Since I've been made an honorary JPALer a few minutes ago by the big boss, I don't know if I can, that comes with extra privileges, Iqbal, but I will take it anyway. It's good to be here. It's first India Scale-Up Summit. Shobhini, it is the first India Scale-Up Summit because there hasn't been one, so we call it the first of many, hopefully. It's a very interesting room. If you look around, you will find out researchers, academicians, governments, retired IAS officers. I see a lot of familiar faces, someone I've been working with for the last 20 years. Non-profit organizations of all kinds, working on gender, early childhood, healthcare, economic growth. I think Pritika was here somewhere. There you go. And philanthropists and investors, business people as well. I think the title is called Pracademically Speaking, which is, someone here knows where we stole that title from. For those of you who don't know what pracademic is, it's a practitioner who has the mind of the academic and an academic with the lens of a practitioner. So we have all of us here, hopefully. Shobhini will be representing the pracademic academic, and the rest of us will try to be the pracademic practitioners. But before we get started, maybe a question for all of us in the room here, and I'm going to start with the first answer. When you hear the word scale up, what comes to your mind when you say scale up? What do you think of when you think of scale up? I'll tell you what I think of, and that kind of sets the tone. I think of State Bank of India. Because the first time I encountered this problem was about 12 years ago when I was in sales and business development, and we had a great solution. This was a Fortune 50 company. And I was really excited having sold this solution to the CIO of this bank in Mumbai. And we go back to Bangalore, and the engineering team said, there's no way we can do this. Did you know who you sold this to? I said, yes, State Bank of India, the premium client. Do you know how many branches they have? He said, I don't know. It's 25,000 branches. This was 12 years ago. I'm sure they have more now. And do you know where their branches are? 25,000 branches across the length and breadth of the country. No branch looks alike. The Lodi Road branch here would be very different from the Chandrapur or the Chindwara branch in rural Madhya Pradesh or rural Maharashtra. And so you can't sell this solution everywhere. It's a great solution. We want a big client, but I'm sorry, we cannot deploy it in all 25,000 branches. So if we can put the Mentimeter QR code, if you don't mind. And I'd like to have all of us engage with this. Yeah, there we go. Do we have Wi-Fi here? It's working? Okay, great. So all of us as well here, if you could maybe, what do you think of? Yes, please don't. I think we need to go to the, so I'm going to enter State Bank of India. When I hear scale up, the example that always comes to my mind is State Bank of India, right? So we'll try and get that word cloud going through the next few minutes, maybe 10 seconds for all of us to put our answers in there. Are you getting? Is not. So Vatsala, I think it's waiting for some. Okay, there we go. I found you. You have the answer, so I'm going to say SBI. So it doesn't have to be a very serious answer. It could be what's the first thing that comes to mind. I can enter your answer. Okay, we'll keep that as a secret for the next one. I have entered Smriti Ji's answer as well because she doesn't want to turn her phone on, for obvious reasons. Okay, that's okay. There's a lot of words coming up. Tata, UPI. All right, let's keep looking at that. But I'm going to keep this session moving because there is enough evidence to show that if the session before lunch is delayed, lunch will be delayed. So without delay, let's bring in someone here who wakes up every morning thinking about a number that very few of us can even imagine. Right? Smriti ji, what is that number that you wake up with every day thinking about?
Okay, so it's 10 crore plus another 15. Now you'll ask, which are these 15? So 10 crore are SHG women who make this extremely powerful network of 91 lakh SHGs, and 15 women are people like Mona Dave and several other who are part of my mission unit, who meet me at 9, hounding me for time, for documents that I haven't read, work that I haven't done. So I'm petrified of them. So the answer is 10 crores plus 15.
So for some of you who may not know that's 250 million people she wakes up thinking about almost every day. So that's, when you think scale, if I think 25,000 SBI branches was scale, this is orders of magnitude higher. So I'm going to put the same question to you. Sorry. Say it again.
The question is...
Okay, no, for you, Smriti ji.
Oh, okay.
Same question to you now. What does scale up mean for you?
Okay.
When you think of programs at MORD, how do you grapple with the idea of 250 or let's say 100 million? But how do you then work your way towards that? How do you evaluate, as Iqbal said, if there's a really good program that works in one state, an NGO that is running something phenomenally well in 20 districts? How do you reconcile that with how you have to think, what you have to think about at the 100 million level?
Okay, that's a tough one. But the DNRLM, the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Rashtriya Ajivika Mission, was not a magic work. It's worked for more than a decade and a half in its earlier avatars and then later as DNRLM. And when several thousand of partners like you who rolled it out on the ground for us. So we began small, but what we always look for are very small pilots and then scaling them gradually. And when we are talking of scale in a country like India, we are talking of how to move it from a cluster to a village to a district, and then answer questions like, एक district में क्यों कर रहे हो, सारे में क्यों नहीं कर रहे हो, CM की constituency का district क्यों नहीं ले रहे हो? Very difficult ones to answer. And while we are scaling, we also understand that the community buy-in has to be there. So once the community buy-in is there, and we have community-based capacity building, can we really think of decentralization and take it to a larger scale? So that, according to me, is scale up.
Fantastic. If you don't mind, I'm going to engage some folks from the group as well. You mentioned community as part of it, and I know we have folks from Noora Health, Varun, and Seema as well, whose entire design is based on community engagement, participation. So can you maybe shed a little bit of light on how you put people in the center of your design and how you work with government, and what are some of the emergent challenges in that space? Maybe Seema or Varun.
Thanks for the question. When we think of scale, a top-down approach and a bottoms-up approach has worked for us. where we have the buy-in at the highest level. Noora Health is a company which is a non-profit which looks at family caregiving education, and we partner with 9 state governments now. We've reached over 35 million people. And the MOU at the highest level, buy-in at the hospital administrator level, at the nurse level, and at the trainer level all helps. Initially, when we take it to, it has to be top down and bottoms up. And for the thing to sustain over a long time, the bottoms up becomes more important than the top down. They have to see value, and we have to be able to unlock that value. We have to see the value, both from evidence and from the visits that we do, to see that it's actually making an impact, and that keeps us going. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And so I'll come back to the bottom up and top down as we go through the rest of the folks here as well. Mangal, you are, I would say, small to mid-sized NGO, Key Education Foundation, maybe 1 or 2 sentences on that so everybody's aware of that. And also specifically say you're someone very early on in your career decided to solve a particular problem. You obviously didn't want to solve it only in the proximate areas where you were seeing, you were looking at solving it at scale. But for an NGO like you, you've chosen to work with the government, right? Yeah. You're relatively small, budget-wise, ability to execute-wise, you're in 1 state. How do you, so when you go meet with Smriti ji, right, you say, I am running this program in, 25 districts in Karnataka. What can you do at the union level? How does that conversation go, and what are some of the challenges? But a little bit about KEF would be a good start as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Murugan. So,
sorry, none of these questions are on this paper, so I'm really sorry to put you guys in.
I run an organization along with my co-founder Shweta called Key Education Foundation. We work on early childhood education, 3 to 6 year age group children, ensuring that they are ready for school when they enter grade 1. And I think our philosophy of scale was rooted in our experience before we started the organization, which was we were teachers. I think our bigger job was finding resources online, finding out whether they worked, and then contextualizing it for our classroom, trying it out, and then coming back and saying this didn't work, or prototyping it again. And I think we continue to stay with that philosophy, which is what are the existing solutions that are out there which is working, which is proven. As an organization, we don't want to spend time building our own solutions, but rather taking solutions that are available, proven, and can work. And as an organization, we want to focus on integrating it into the government system. So our one-word definition of scale is integration. Now, to your question, Murugan, on if I were to meet Smriti ji and put a proposal for scale, I think what we look at is there a strong system of scale? Because what we have realized is very often, I think, scale conversations happen at the top. The MOUs get signed, and then all the burden is on the teacher to implement it. And then there's no one looking at the entire cadre of people who need to be a part of that scale thing. So I think removing the teacher to be the entire karta dharta of scale, to saying, can we engage the block education officer, the CRP, the diet official, and look at a system, enter an agreement within government which looks at the entire system and builds capacity of that, is what I would propose as a proposal to the government, to say this is how we should scale. And then in between that, the last indicator outcome that we look at for scale is where is the money going to come from? And I think that's very important. And I think, we have had our own ups and downs in understanding that. But then what we have realized is, there are different, what we have learned is, I think philanthropic money can be really understood or utilized in the best of ways if the government money is understood well, and targeted well, right? And I will build on it, Murugan, but maybe next question or something like that. But what we have learned is on money is that government has money, it needs to be tapped on, and philanthropic money needs to fill the gap where it is, where the government doesn't have, rather than spending it what is already there. Yeah.
But so assume for a minute, Smritiji, you are in the Department of Education now, and he does come to you to want to scale this program, and there is philanthropic capital, let's say, supporting Mangal on this. We already know the state is capacity constrained, as in you don't have enough. You've turned your phone off, that's proof enough, right? What do you think in terms of the system's ability to be able to evaluate whether what Mangal is telling is actually, is there evidence to say that what he's doing works or his organization doing works? Does he have the capability to execute this at scale beyond the 20 districts? What's some of the thinking that goes behind, or is there need to do more from the government side on that point? If you'd love to hear, because you do work with a lot of nonprofits as well at MORD.
Yeah, so Iqbal and you have already said that we are capacity constrained, time constrained. So when an NGO comes to us bringing a proposal, I think what we internally do with very little resources that we have at hand is do a quick due diligence, understand from the state where they're operating that does it work. Are they just here to sign an MOU so that they could get more money in the philanthropy market, or have they done honest goodness work on the ground? Once that's done, we quickly get some of our experts to sit and talk to them and understand how is it that they plan to implement beyond the 20 districts that they're already doing, or if they want to scale it beyond. And once our core team understands that they mean business and they do have the boots on the ground to do it, that's when we will make a proposal and convince the seniors who really have to give us a nod before we could sign it. But yes, to put the long story short, I think what I will look for is hardcore evidence from the ground. In our case, we largely depend on the states. And also whether the model is sustainable, cost effective, and has proven scalability in whatever they were doing.
It's a shameless plug to Aspire. If Aspire fronts Mangal, you'll feel more confident?
I like this position to be.
That is
the government and there's a funder talking about us. I like this place to be.
So that's a tough one to answer, but I guess we'll still look at it from the models that they have. Yeah.
No, fair enough. I think the reason, part of the thesis of Aspire is also that there are incredible young organizations like Mangal's and others who are in the room who may not have the seat at the table or the ability to sit with the secretary, principal secretary, or whoever at the state level or the union level. And if, JPAL through Aspire can kind of play that role of bringing all of these organizations together, working on, so you get two things. One is, that they're going to be working on evidence-backed solutions, and they're going to be certified, and there's a common minimum framework, and all of that. So I think that's a shameless plug for Aspire as an honorary JPALer for the day, Iqbal. But, if Bikrama is in the room, there you are, Bikrama. You've been day one from CSF, scaled Central Square Foundation. Now you're on the Convergence Foundation hat, looking at a portfolio of scaling organizations, and also now launched the Scale Foundation, which is looking at how can nonprofits and government and philanthropy work together. Just between the conversation over the last 15 minutes or so, any additional thoughts? And you have exactly 90 seconds. Sorry, someone's coming to you. On your right, yeah.
Thank you so much. This is really enlightening. My name is Bikrama. I'm an operating partner at the Convergence Foundation. I spent 10 years prior to this at Central Square Foundation, and I think we learned a lot at CSF on how can we strategically complement government to seek, large-scale outcomes? And I think we codified some of that through a report last year called the Systemic Impact Exemplars, where we profiled some 20 organizations in India that have actually created non-linear impact working strategically with government. And I think what that showed us in a way was that there is this new cadre of organizations that are playing this missing middle role in the sector. And we call them the system support organization. And they approach government not with preset programs or solutions, but they actually go and engage with government on some seeking to solve backwards on some population level goals. And then diagnose where some gaps are and then do complementary stuff to not just the government, to what others are doing. So I think Scale is an organization that we've set up with TCF is incubated, which is trying to, in a way, create the scaffolding around more SSOs in India. How do we attract more philanthropic capital to this? How do we get government leaders, ma'am, like yourself, to even be aware that these SSOs exist? And then can we play some enabling role as in the ecosystem to have 100 more SSOs in India? Why are we only having 20, 30 SSOs? Yeah.
Thanks for that additional color on this topic. I'm going to bring in Shobini here on something which is not prepared for. I picked it up from what Iqbal said this morning. Should researchers be insulated from the troubles of scale-up? All the messiness of scale-up, should that be worrying researchers?
I do not think that researchers are isolated from the messiness of scaling up at all. Because when we are thinking
the question is, should they be?
Oh, absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. And I don't think there is a choice. So even if I say yes or no, it doesn't matter, because there is no choice in the matter.
Okay. So now for the question that I think we prepared for, which is how much evidence is enough evidence for you to say this is ready for scale up beyond the areas in which we have tested? Or how do you think about that problem?
So when there is enough evidence for you to...
When do you say there is enough evidence to say let's go nationwide?
So can I ask you a question, Murugan? How was...
I actually like this.
It's a very simple question. How was the dinner last night?
How was dinner last night? You were not with us.
No. You didn't invite me.
It was good.
Did you eat enough?
Yes. More than what I should have.
Perfect. So whether there's enough evidence to, when you think about the threshold for evidence to be able to scale something, it's a bit like whether you've eaten enough. It depends on so single plate filling or going in for a second helping, it really depends on your appetite, it depends on your health, it depends on the occasion. So when you think about scaling up, and whether you think about whether the evidence is enough to back you to scale, it's very context dependent. The threshold depends upon what kind of evidence you have, how the context is changing. When you think of a balanced meal, you need many ingredients to make up a balanced meal. Similarly, you need, beyond, if you jump off the main evaluation, you also do need process monitoring data, you need implementation data to tell you we're going in the right direction, you need focus group discussions, qualitative data, you need cost effectiveness analysis, most importantly, to understand, am I getting my bang for the buck? So it's almost, so for me, it's a bit like, what are the different ingredients? What's your appetite? How much more do you will feel hungry later on. You will want more. Your taste might change. The demography changes. There are political shifts, bureaucratic shifts. There are priority shifts. COVID hits you. So I would say that the thresholds will vary. The context will vary. It is sensitive to contexts. And I'm going to give you, and it's a non-linear journey. I think that's everybody in this room will also recognize it's a very non-linear journey, depending on many factors. And I'll take you back to a very quick example. Everybody has been here talking about teaching at the right level. We think of it as this one, program that is well set, has gone to scale in India, is working with governments, it's gone to Africa, Latin America, it's being scaled, right? And you might think that we have enough evidence to say we know this program works, and then let's take it it's traveled across continents. But when we started on this journey, and even now, we are still learning a lot in the adaptation of even this, the model of teaching at the right level. And the journey actually started in 2001, but I won't get to that. I'll skip to my story in 2008, 2009, when we were working with, we had this model. There was a certain hypothesis that Pratham had, and it was mostly around how do we get kids to catch up and how do we teach them at the level that they are at, rather than sort of trying to compete with this, what we call the over-ambitious curriculum. So how do we get kids to catch up so that they can actually be at grade level with the curriculum? In 2008, the intent was to how do we take this program now that Pratham has developed in communities, sitting under a tree in people's homes, how do we take it to a government system and integrate it within that government system? And we took it to 2 states in India, and I'll give the story of Bihar, where we had volunteers from Pratham supporting school teachers to be able to transfer that knowledge and help teachers out in classrooms. What we found was almost like a substitution effect. So the school teachers were continuing to do their own work, and the volunteers were continuing to do the teaching. So while we did see impacts, we realized through a lot of our classroom observation that there was a substitution effect that was happening there. And we were almost giving up hope, saying maybe this program is not built for a government school system. Maybe you have to think about something else. And it so happened that year, there was almost a eureka moment between Rukmini, between the then Principal Secretary Education, and Esther Duflo, who was one of the researchers on the ground, who was trying to figure out in the messiness of all of this, how do we take this program and how do we evaluate it in the government school system. And they said, if every June the schools shut for the summer, and the idea was that what if we were to take this program to the school, and what we also were realizing is there's a lot of competing priorities that a teacher has in the classroom. So what if we take this program to this pedagogy, the same teachers spend a month of June in schools in a summer camp to do this kind of, to teach kids through this grouping and the pedagogy that's associated with teaching at the right level. I remember, I've heard these anecdotally, so I was a research manager with JPAL at that point of time, and I was working with quite a few of our researchers, and the story that I've heard from Rukmini and Michael Walton is that the government said, let's do this everywhere. It's a great idea, let's do it everywhere. But then as researchers, we were like, oh no, we are not going to have a comparison group. Where that comparison group is out of the window. How do we know that this works or not? So it's pretty much going from, so while the orders came from the Principal Secretary's office, our researchers had to go, Michael and Rukmini had to go school by school to tell to control schools to say, do not implement it here. This has to be a control group and this is the treatment group. So we did manage to get some semblance of a comparison group where it was business as usual. The kids were doing whatever they wanted to do during summer camp, but we actually had the pedagogy run in the
But isn't that
schools.
a very difficult choice from your seat to say don't do these in these districts?
Yes. And I did ask this question to our JPAL team when we were working to scale up graduation approach, on which I'd like to speak a little later. And I asked them the same question. I said, they're a question of ethics. In fact, Karthik Muralidharan in his book also talks about it. And I said, look, this is bothering me and a lot of people are asking. So what JPAL explained is, no, we just stagger the implementation rather than leaving them totally behind. So at least in the work that we are doing, I think that works. But otherwise, if we were to say that leave a group behind, it would be very difficult for us to say yes to that.
And I don't disagree with you on this. Now here, if the thing that what we were facing with was that it didn't work. So we are not leaving a group behind. Here in this situation, we were trying to think about whether this is going to work with the singular focus, if the teachers have that focus. So it's almost thinking about, before you take something that were not confident about working in the classroom setting, you're taking it to all throughout the state of Bihar. I think for us, the least we could have done is to make sure that understand whether this is working or not. So you don't want, so the ethics comes in here to say that you're spending so much of money, time and resources, and people's time and money and resources, taking something that we are not confident is working. So that's where you need to have that experimentation mindset to say, let's take a small group aside and let's see if this is working or not. But let me complete my story. I know you have another question for me, Murgal.
You know I can stop you.
No.
No, that's the whole session.
So I'm going to complete my story to say where I'm headed with the evidence. So it was what we found in that 1 month. The teachers with a singular focus were able to do what they were not able to do in the messiness of an entire classroom, is that the results from the treatment group that we saw in terms of how quickly the kids caught up to grade level in that 1 month was equivalent to 2 years of the same teacher trying to do the same thing in the classroom.
Yeah.
So we learned very important lessons here, which then we took to the next phase, and we worked with the Haryana government, only with government school teachers, where Pratham transferred the pedagogy and the teacher training to the department and the teachers. But there were here again we needed a different kind of evidence. We wanted to not only see whether it worked in the government system, but we had learned a very important lesson from Bihar, is that we need mentors for the teachers. And how do we get mentorship? And we had the cluster resource coordinators providing that mentorship. So with every iteration, you need to keep tweaking that system. So now, for instance, when it went to now we know the model works. We have teacher-led and student-led, volunteer-led model. We know that it works. In Africa, over the last, I'd say 5 years, 7 years, there has been so much adaptive learning. The context may be the same, but the partners are different, the demography is different, the implementation capacity is different, the governments have a different frame of mind. So there again, we needed to have a lot more evidence to be able to have the proof of concepts.
This may be a good time to get Smriti to talk about the same kind of ups and downs in the graduation approach, perhaps, right? In terms of different, what is the graduation approach? What are we doing with ASPIRE? And
okay. So, for us, the graduation approach and getting a national level approval into Samaveshi Ajivika Yojana is like carrying a baby for 3 years. Sorry, I'm being dramatic. And then finally we got the baby to see the bright sunlight. And beginning very small, across the country we just had 50,000 odd population in 11 states working on ultra poor graduation approach. 2 development sector partners and JPAL being the conscience keeper, time keeper and the result keeper. Work like a perfect chemistry for us. And we realized that if not now, we won't be able to scale up because the 15th Finance Commission cycle is coming to an end. And if we don't have a foot in the door, we may not have. And yet, it took us 2 years, 1.5 to be honest, from the time that Ministry of Finance gave us the approval to scale up to convincing everybody around the table to agree that this can be done. And there were all sorts of questions that how do you identify multidimensionally poor? How do you contextualize it? How do you know what works in state A will work in state B? And we navigated all those set of questions. And I just want to talk about the messiness on scale, which is so important. We even came to a point where everybody said 15th FC is ending, so stop, don't do this now. We'll look at it at the 16th FC. And we actually cried for help and we got everybody together. And we went back to Sadat Jeevakoparjan Yojana in Bihar, the first real scale up. JPAL helped us understand the outcomes from there. And then based on that, we answered some very difficult questions to convince the policymakers to give us the approval. Big questions were, we've moved beyond grant-based development. Why are you transferring consumption grant? That doesn't work. We are now working in a loan ecosystem. Why should it not be a DBT and why should it be kind? Why is it that you're giving livelihood grant? Why can't they get from elsewhere? And the big question that there have been so many government programs, why is it that they're even left behind? Even for that, we had to sit with JPAL and the senior machinery of Bihar to understand why is it that they are left behind? Because despite whatever we did during the self-help group movement, there were still some who did not have the propensity to save, or even if they could save for a month or two, they still fell off the system. Bringing all this evidence together, working with the partners, we finally got the approval to roll out what is called the Samaveshi Ajivika Yojana. And even while we are talking, we are planning to scale up in a very small number, which is 1 lakh across the entire country. And going forward in the next Finance Commission cycle, I was just discussing with Shobhini, how is it that we could scale it even further? So scale in the very core is so difficult, and convincing people is extremely challenging. But we managed.
It's a fantastic example. In fact, maybe moment to take pause and actually applaud this, because it is, as you said, not just 2 partners. Now there are several partners across multiple states taking something that was evidence-backed. Evidence was done in Bangladesh and then in West Bengal and then in Bihar and in other places. Then there is the State Rural Livelihood Mission. I think Rahul might be here from Bihar. Jivika, if I'm not wrong, but
No, Rahul
is not here yet.
He'll
He'll be coming later. And then we have the union, the MORD, and then all of it coming together. Who is going to hold the fort through all of this messiness of scale? It can't be one NGO, it can't be one state government, it has to be someone. And that's really kind of a very good example in my mind on what the role of ASPIRE could be, right? So it's a great, thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to go to Sunita now, who's been patiently listening to all of this, and then with another question for all of us as well, because I'm really intrigued to see what does scaling up mean for you is easy to pass on. So I don't know if that means many people have entered that easy to pass on, or is that just 4 words that's why it's in the middle. Sometimes these word clouds behave differently. But Sunita, how do you balance, you're running Breakthrough, we heard about Breakthrough in Shobhini's session. How do you balance evidence rigor? Obviously your solution is backed by evidence. Solution urgency, because there's a window of opportunity where you have to go and do this. And the political economy, because you're working in two very different types of states, Punjab and Orissa. And you've been successful in statewide roll-up in 2 different states. How's your balance? What are some of the catalysts and accelerators, and what's the magic behind why you're able to scale with evidence?
Thanks, Morgan, for asking me such a simple and easy question, really.
All right, so 30 seconds.
Thanks. But seriously, I mean, we've all been talking about this, and that scaling is not easy. It's messy, it's complicated for the government, it's complicated for the evaluation agencies, it's complicated for us programmers. We need to be in it for a long run. It's like 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards, and it's always that journey that we're trying to kind of unravel. Our program was talked about in the beginning, Taron Ki Toli. We started, and that's where I'm going to talk from. We started that program in 2012, designing that program. And we had a partnership with JPAL, and I think that's been one of the best partnerships that we've had in kind of taking us through a journey from deep-rooted work in communities and in schools and kind of taking it to scale. So we did a RCT with JPAL in 314 schools in Haryana, and Haryana at that point of time had, extreme sex selection. We had 830 girls to 1,000 boys. It wasn't easy to kind of work in those spaces. There was hardly any civil society in that area. And we tried and tested the program with great results, and we kind of thought, okay, the RCT is showing up results, but does it also work beyond Haryana? So we took it to UP, we took it to Jharkhand, Bihar, with slight adaptations, looking at the local cultural context. And again, different evaluations proved that the program is successful, and we were able to actually reduce the age of marriage. We were able to increase the age of marriage by 1.11 months in Bihar and Jharkhand. So that gave us a lot of confidence, and we got talking, and we felt that this is a program which is proven. It's successful, the design is great, let's try and scale. And we realized that it's actually a combination of multiple things. It's about evidence, clearly. It's about political economy. We have to be really be cued into that, and the urgency is seriously there. So how do you kind of align the priorities? How do you keep adjusting? Like ma'am also said, that you have to keep at it. I mean, just because you have a proven model doesn't mean that you can copy paste the same thing in different states. It doesn't work like that. You really need to know the context, the cultural context, the political context. So we really have to kind of adapt to it, and then sequencing matters. So the evidence of Tarun Ki Toli really helped build credibility to the entire program. As practitioners, we know it's a great program, it works well, we've seen stories on the ground, but who's listening to us? Right? I mean, it's just another NGO story if it is not backed by evaluators of a certain credibility, and that really helps. And I think having that helped in kind of establishing those partnerships with multiple states, not just in doing scaling in Punjab and Odisha, but also having technical partnerships with Tamil Nadu, Angyar Ma'am is here, and other 2 states. That program actually brought to light that there can be attitudinal change and a behavioral shift can happen, and it can be sustained over time and at scale. So that evidence really helped, and it also proved that it can be done in a way that it is reasonable budgetarily. So for us as an organization going from district to district, scaling up, what we were thinking scaling up was not really scaling up unless and until we kind of partnered with the government. Because for us as an NGO, it would have meant that you would need like thousands of human resource. We would have to raise endless amount of money, and we would keep harassing the donors to kind of give us money. And that's not really taking us anywhere, and government is the best partner to kind of scale up any kind of efforts. Urgency, yes, the urgency is from all our sides, not just our urgency to kind of, we have a proven model and we want to take it to scale, but the urgency is also there that India has around 252 million adolescents in the country. And we are in a state where there is widespread early marriage and all other problems associated to it. If we delay by endless years, we are only kind of pushing more children out of school. We are probably pushing them into child labor. We are probably pushing them into early marriage and pushing them into a cycle of poverty, which is difficult to get by. And we are talking about Viksit Bharat. How is that going to happen when children are out of school? So urgency is rare. That's clearly there. And it's not as if the government does not want to kind of implement these fantastic proven models. They want to have that evidence and they want to do it at scale. So whenever we go to governments, of course, there are certain governments who would say, okay, do small pilots, but we have done quite a few pilots and it's already proven. So they would say, okay, do it at scale. So both in Punjab and Odisha, the bureaucrats were very clear that we had to do it across all schools. So we are doing it around with 30,000 schools, with 4 million adolescents, with 66,000 teachers. And for a small organization, I mean, just imagine us doing it directly. But if you're doing it through the system, which is already established, you're just kind of reinforcing the messaging and taking it, many steps forward. So that's there. With regard to the political economy, I think it is a fine balancing act. I mean, I have to share that in the past 3.5 years that we've been scaling the program, we've had 4 governments changing in Punjab and Odisha with different political parties leading the system, and it's not been easy. And when you talk about principal secretaries, I mean, I think we've already seen around 11 or 12 principal secretaries changing in these 2 states. So by the time you kind of build the rapport, they're ready to move. So there are some things which have worked for us, and
what I find interesting is, and this is something we spoke about, which is, they say that the best magic or the greatest magic is, the best technology is indistinguishable from magic or something like that, right? So the way I saw your program is the best social impact program is indistinguishable from the program that the government is running anyway. So today, one cannot remove the gender equity curriculum from any of these states because it's integrated into the chapters.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of, it's not an added half an hour every day or anything like that, right?
So, I mean, clearly, the government has to adopt a program and they have to own the program. It cannot be a breakthrough program or a JPAL program. It is a government-run program. It's called Chandan Reshma in Punjab, it's called Barnali in Odisha, and both the programs are owned by the government and we are only technical partners. And what's helped us, I think Iqbal spoke about it, about having the top alignment, CM inaugurating the launch of the program, having MOUs in place, having the government budget the entire, the printing, the integration, and all of that. And I think the critical piece behind all these numbers and things is the relationship building that you have across vertical. So it's not just at a CM level or a bureaucrat level, but also to the last mile on how they own the program and how they kind of connect with the issue that you're talking about. Because we are talking large numbers, and if people don't connect, then that's not going to really change a difference. I just want to share one tiny
Sure, I'm getting
story. Oh,
that's
yes.
the entire session time.
This is last
but that's
one.
not fair because we started at 11. So we have time till 11:40.
So I'll just make a quick story. I mean, while we're talking about these millions of, numbers and reach and system strengthening and all of that, what really keeps us motivated is how it's making a difference at a people level, besides the system level, because system is also kind of consisting of people. So I remember this one teacher in Punjab, a female teacher who wasn't taking up, a higher promotion or a role because she felt that she had to balance her domestic work and child care and elderly care with this work, and she said, oh, it's too much. And when she attended the program, she said that I'm going to take up that promotion because I want to be a role model for all the students that I'm teaching. And by me not taking up that role, I'm kind of setting up a bad precedent. And that kind of flips it and says that, yes, system change is possible. People within the system are willing to change and are willing to make that investment. So thank you.
Thank you, Sunita. If you don't mind, I would like to bring in Sampath here. Meghalaya, he does incredible work in Meghalaya. Sampath, you work with a lot of nonprofits. You're building coalitions. You're the development commissioner as well, representing the state. This is something that, all of this, what we've talked about, forget the evidence part, which comes as default in this group. But how do you build coalition? How do you manage through the political economy? And how do you ensure with outcome in mind? Which, love to hear some of your thoughts as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Murugan, for inviting me for this beautiful lecture. But I've come here to meet actually Mr. Iqbal and all other colleagues. Madam, you are here. So, and also I'm listening to Sunita ji, and also I wanted to meet Rukmini ji also. So basically, what I wanted to say is that there is a, I just wanted to start with what is the one word for the scale. I see, everyone knows that government, state, but I also see that reaching last mile population is the scale. So that's where the challenge is all about. So having said this one of the things actually when I think I was listening to everyone's discussion, maybe I can contribute from the point of a state. Today, the state, there is a tremendous expectations on the state and the states. I think we all have to understand this one, especially state means it is a elected state I'm talking about. So there is a tremendous expectations. People expect that the states would bring transformative development. There is a tremendous expectation. So there is a if we understand that aspiration of the people about the state, and then who is running the state? Or who is actually governing the state? Again, I see it's a political leadership. Though we have reform champions like a lot of civil servants, but it is all the more important to see the political leadership, how actually they are supported. It's a very important. So we call it building political supportability is one of the important interventions to achieve the transformative development. So we have this journey for the last 7 years in the state of Meghalaya. So, we have got a new chief minister in 2018, and we started working with a kind of a framework, how to actually transform Meghalaya from, a very, very, challenging state to a state that everyone wanted to see. So we built a 5-pillar framework, and as part of this 5-pillar state capability, enhancement framework, one of the things that what we started looking at is how effectively we are using the data, evidence, and research. This is one of the 5 pillars of the state capability building. So when I just want to tell you, Meghalaya, I'll just give an example of how that can be done. And when we looked at it, so we have a huge the children population in the state. In fact, 49% of the state population is below 19 years. So we started actually using some of this evidence, like for example, Harvard Center on Developing Child. It has come out with the latest advances on early childhood development. So we now today Meghalaya is implementing the first of its kind comprehensive early childhood development project in Asia Pacific region. So I think I would like to say this one. And we are able to reduce maternal deaths and child deaths, like maternal deaths, by 50% in the last 5 years. So all again evidence-based interventions, but to do that one, what is required? In fact, I was looking at it, like how, as I said, evidence, people in fact, political leadership would support, they require quick wins. You need to show results. So what we did was strategically, we in fact, our immunization rates were very lowest in the country. We were 34. And in 8 months, we pulled it up to second rank in 2020. So then, this can be done. It can be done. Basically, what we needed is that we need to quick results. Then actually, the political leadership would come up with more authorization. In fact, today we are spending more 8% of the state budget on healthcare. We are the only state to achieve that one. And honestly, I'm telling you this one. I'm not saying ask Finance Commission, only state to achieve this one. So the reason is that, what I wanted to say is that we need to, one of the things is that getting the results, show the results to the political leadership. Second one is that we also have to, require, to provide a holding environment to facilitate this entire process. So you require more champions, you need to invest on that one. In fact, so there is a lot of, as I was listening to, a lot of the time we put a lot of focus on the frontliners. But we don't actually forget, who's the supportive management. The middle management is also important. How to engage with them. So a lot of work is required on that. In fact, we created we can share a lot, but thank you for, asking this question. Yes, I think I wanted to give one piece of information, which is unique to Meghalaya. Thank you.
Thank you, Sampath. And I think, yes, Smriti ji, and then Iqbal, my boss, wants to also close the session, and we'll close it with that.
Okay. So,
I think Vijay, you're okay on time?
I think congratulations to Meghalaya is really due. Mr. Sampath, we visited Meghalaya while you were probably busy in some other course, they said. Meghalaya is one of the finest examples of convergence. And we went down to the grassroots to see how health, education, the panchayats, everything, and the doctors, they work together. We went into cluster level federations and SHGs where they said that they have managed to reduce infant mortality and maternal mortality to the lowest that they've ever seen. They boasted of 2 years where there's been no child death. We met doctors who supported institutional delivery to the point of going and convincing the panchayat head to encourage the woman to come to those transit houses where they can stay before they get into delivery. So apart from all the other pillars that you mentioned, Mr. Sampath, I think what I took away was convergence no matter what, no egos, nothing else. And what you showed are big wins, because which is why the political leadership is so keyed in to whatever you people do. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fantastic. It's a great job. I mean, for those of you who want to know more, Sampath is going to be here for the rest of the day. So is Mangal is going to be here. I know you have more to talk about in your program and some of the challenges. Love to maybe you spend time with him as well. But Iqbal, you wanted to.
Yes, thank you. This is incredible. I just wanted to kind of respond to 3 great points that you made. First one was the one about when is a program, when is evidence enough? And I think Shobhini answered almost all of it. But I think I always try to remember 3 things in threes. So I would say context, complexity, and cost. I think if a program has been evaluated in a context and you are, I think the barriers to scaling it up, the threshold of evidence is much less. Pratham and government of Bihar have evaluated teaching at the right level. Government of Bihar and Pratham want to join forces together to evaluate it. It's very different from teaching at the right level being taken to Cote d'Ivoire or Zambia. You might want to do it again and so forth. So that's context. The second is complexity of the program. Trying to scale up a program like targeting the ultra poor is highly complex. It requires state capacity, it requires understanding of the local context, who's going to deliver, what are the implications, is the political buy-in. On the other hand, things like behavioral insights or small incentives. We know incentives to parents to get their children immunized work. And it's a behavioral thing. You do not need to go and test it out 1,600 times. You can take it from one area to the other. And then the final is cost. Again, you want to scale up something like emissions trading. It requires a lot of hardware. It requires a lot of creation of the data. On the other hand, you want to push, again, behavioral nudges through text messages. I would just tell governments, sure, like maybe this, you want to test it a lot more, but what's the cost? It's the marginal cost of pushing text messages, encouraging parents to immunize their child is very low. Test it out, do A/B testing, and so forth. The second thing you asked Smriti, you put her in a spot about what happens if ASPIRE comes and somebody comes with a legitimacy. I would actually say putting together a civil servant hat, and love to hear Sampath and others to talk about this later. Somebody coming and saying, I have been funded by the World Bank or Gates, gets you into the door, but ultimately, actually, Smriti is looking for the ability of the organization to scale up and that credibility, and that's why her answer came kind of from that direction. So actually, I think the Gates Foundations of the world, as well as the Aspires of the world, get credibility from working with the Prathams of the world and the Tarong Kitolis of the world, rather than the ones who are scaling up the program, rather than somebody saying there are enough graveyard of World Bank funded projects, and no civil servant kind of bothers much whether it's this. The final thing I will say is the question which came around about, I think one may go about with this perception that working with governments is tough, absolutely. But at the same time, I think I do want people to come out with a little bit of a more hopeful message. I think we are taking you through we are opening the cupboard of how difficult it is to work with the governments, but it is also, you find the reason you want to find a Smriti is because she will take care of the rest of it to some extent. And so the ability to scale with the governments is great. I loved your point about the Convergence Foundation. The governments are very good at two things: hardware, and they are decently good at hardware, and very good at working on mission mode. Think about Swachh Bharat. Think about Ghar Ghar Nal. That was a mission mode thing. What prevents us from having 1,600 more mission modes in the government is not money, it's the ability, it's the people, it's the capacity on the ground. What Rocket Learnings and Noora Health, two of the organizations whose board I'm sitting on, are able to do with the government, or Pratham is able to do with the government, is, they say, I have this famous word that I coined myself: hardware is hard, but software is harder. So the governments have created this massive hardware. What Rocket Learning and Noora Health and Pratham and those wonderful organizations are able to do is kind of leverage that hardware through incredible software and commitment and make it work. So I really hope we take away that much more positive thing that governments work, and they work fantastically. So those are.
If I could just add to what you're saying, working with the government is much easier now than it was several decades earlier. And Rural Livelihood Program, and particularly Ministry of Rural Development, where I'm currently working, we really walk the talk. If I could tell you how many technical support agencies and state level partners with us, would be anything more than 500. So I think if you're looking for the right time, the time is really now. And we really look forward to more of collaborations.
On that note, thank you, Iqbal, for helping summarize and add color to this. It's really valuable. I think part of the reason why we at Vedis Foundation started working with Iqbal 3-4 years ago and helped kind of co-create ASPIRE is because we strongly believe that path to scale is in the three words that are very important in ASPIRE, which is an alliance, that's the A, scaling, policy impact, right? So it really has to be an alliance, and we have to think scale all the time, and we have to work with policymakers and people who are in the government. So I think it's incredibly it's a great feeling to see today, after 4 years of working together. And I think to talk more about it, I think we have Vijay taking you through what ASPIRE is and what it has been over the next 15 minutes or so. But that's just why we got engaged 4 years ago, and we have more partners on board with Nick and others coming on board. We have an alliance of, I think we'll have the whole details that Vijay will take you through. But it's very happy to be here, and hopefully it's a good segue to that session to talk more about ASPIRE. Thank you all for engaging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists. I'd now like to invite Vatsala and Sachit on stage to present a small token of appreciation to our panelists.
Oh, let's mix it up. I head a gender equity program. Please come forward. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Vatsala and Sachit, please.
Should we get some light?
I will just move on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I don't know why everyone has to wait and look at it, but yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
As we continue our spotlights on programs that are scaling, I'd like to turn to Every Child Counts, a simple yet powerful approach that is transforming how children learn foundational math skills in classrooms across India. I am delighted to welcome John Floretta, Global Deputy Executive Director of JPAL, on the stage to spotlight Every Child Counts.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to give the second spotlight around Every Child Counts. It's 12-year-old scaling journey from starting off in a lab at the Harvard Laboratory of Development Science by Liz Spelke and her research about how children have a basic understanding of logic and math concepts, all the way today, 12 years later, where it's currently reached 600,000 people, students, and will be reaching 800,000 every year. The Math Games is, Every Child Counts is a compilation of 4 games where children learn how to trust their intuitive understanding of math and logic. And if we go to the next slide, part of this was taking it out of the lab and working together with Pratham and with Harini Kannan, who's back here as a co-PI, and Esther Duflo, to test it 3 different times in Delhi to try to find a model that could be scaled through government systems. So the contextualization, the innovation was one part of it, and then there was this tricky context and adaptation, which was the second part of the journey, working at 9 pilots across India. And finally, we're at a stage where in 3 states, in Andhra, in Himachal, and Punjab, it's being scaled up statewide. And a big part of the model is, Pratham is playing a key role in terms of government support, working very closely, but there's other NGOs involved. And one of the things about evidence-based models is you want to have a toolkit or a guide when you're bringing on a government or another partner to help make the understanding of the program and the implementation a little bit more intuitive. So if we go to the next slide, I'm very happy today to launch the Every Child Counts Math Games Implementation Toolkit. It's available in the back room. In the back room, it's available online. And I'd like to welcome Noam Angrist, who's the academic director for the What Works Hub for Global Education, to help launch this. So what's in the toolkit, some of the research, the evaluation of the 3 studies, inside the classroom, what it means for teachers, what it means for students, a sense, is this program, Every Child Counts, right for you, like the contextual information that you need to know, and then a case study from JPAL. It's for people who are thinking about the program at the policy side or the practitioner side. It's for people who will be overseeing the program, people who will be implementing the program. I do want to give a hats off to the ASPIRE-supported JPAL team who's been working on this. So that's VG, that's Parikrama, and many others who have been working so closely with Pratham. And Noam, you want to come up to the stage to help launch the kit toolkit? Thanks, that's it right here. Thank you, Noam. Great, I'm going to give this to you, and then I think you'll be unfolding here the official launch. Many thanks for the What Works Hub from Global Education for the support.
Thank you. Do I get to keep it?
It's all yours. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noam and John. Every Child Counts is indeed a wonderful example of how ASPIRE supports solutions that not only work at scale, but also create the tools and partnerships needed for others to build on. Now, as we segue into the next section, I'm willing to bet that many of you in this room have asked yourself this at some point. This works, but how do we scale it? That's exactly the question we hope to answer with this session. And to show us how ASPIRE is making the process of scaling deliberate and systemic, I'd like to now invite Vijay Iyer, Associate Director of Policy Scale-Ups, JPAL South Asia, and Unit Director for ASPIRE. Please join me in welcoming her with a warm round of applause.
If scaling were straightforward, my remarks here today would be much shorter, which does make me wonder what that means for my job description. ASPIRE sits at the intersection where evidence meets reality, helping adapt proven solutions with governments, delivery systems, institutions, and politics. Now, I want to take you inside ASPIRE and show you how we are working to crack the code of scale, building a deliberate structure, a shared language, putting in place a mechanism that makes scaling not a chance, but about design. Most of the individual scale-ups you will see under ASPIRE today predate its inception. They began years earlier, led by government, civil society organizations, researchers, and funders who were thinking about testing what could be scaled. Across states and sectors, we kept learning lessons, what worked, what didn't, and why. But most often, that knowledge lived only in people's minds and often fading away when projects ended or people moved away. And so, as we shaped ASPIRE's goals, we knew it couldn't just be about supporting scaling. It also had to be about creating a mechanism to capture the lessons and make scaling systematic. Over the decade, patterns have emerged, common stages that programs pass through, and common roles we at ASPIRE must play. In other words, there's the ASPIRE's role, and then the program's pathway. So for us at ASPIRE, it is about selecting the right innovations, supporting governments and partners to adapt them, and sustaining them through government ownership. Let's see how this plays out in real life. You just heard about the Every Child Counts or math games. So we selected this program because we found that across the 3 rounds of rigorous evaluations, it showed that children's innate and math outcomes improved. Working with Pratham, researchers, and funded by USAID Div,
We then supported governments to adapt it into curriculum, teacher training, and classroom practice. We also explored an alternative pathway, inviting other civil society organizations to take it forward. Today, together with multiple CSOs and governments, we are focused at sustaining the model by integrating it into budgets, curricula, and monitoring systems. So that's the ASPIRE's role. And for the program, it began with Pratham's under Pratham-led delivery model, where the innovation started, and moved into the learning stage, where 5 states piloted the program to adapt pedagogy to their context. We are still navigating integration by embedding curriculum, training, calendars, and monitoring into education systems. And then remember the twist we added earlier, a certification course that invited other CSOs to run their own learning pilots and integration rounds. This turned the Math Games journey into less of a single track and more of a busy intersection. But that was intentional. It allowed us to explore multiple pathways at once, building an ecosystem where evidence doesn't sit within one program or organization alone, but it becomes part of the DNA of many. We now have 7 new partners in the 2nd edition of this certification course. From Pratham to Key Education Foundation and beyond, this approach ensures Every Child Counts is scaled up by becoming indistinguishable from existing programs. And finally, the transfer of ownership to governments, with them leading delivery at scale in 3 states across thousands of schools in others, and ASPIRE playing a supporting role. And you can see ASPIRE's role and the ILIT pathway are about systematic acceleration for many actors to adapt and take evidence to scale. And already, we are seeing results through ASPIRE. Together, we have reached millions of people across across education, livelihoods, gender, and climate solutions. We have redirected hundreds of crores in government funding for higher impact. And we have forged long-term partnerships with state and central governments, embedding solutions into systems so they endure well beyond a single political cycle. I'd like to share 4 hard-won lessons from across our portfolio. 1, scalability has to be intentional from the outset. The graduation approach scaled in India because it fit into existing systems like the self-help groups. Where that kind of pathway is missing, evidence often stalls, and programs often stalls, and evidence alone is not enough. That's why ASPIRE sharpens clarity on what to scale, building on JPAL's generalizability framework, which focuses on whether strong causal evidence exists and if it can travel to new contexts. We are now adding other considerations based on implementation science to check if it can be delivered within government systems and financed year after year within budgets. 2, pilots are not miniaturized versions of the finalized program. We piloted Every Child Counts across 6 states. These were test runs to find out what works in practice and, as importantly, what doesn't. ASPIRE responds by helping governments adapt and simplify interventions to their essential elements, while absorbing risks so pilots prepare systems rather than run parallel to them. 3, integration depends on institutional memory. The gender equity curriculum spread to 30,000 schools because the curriculum, training, and monitoring were locked into place. So now it is no longer dependent on a handful of champions. And that's why ASPIRE is codifying scale readiness and investing in institutional memory through playbooks, standard operating procedures, and monitoring frameworks. So integration survives turnover. And for the last one, cost decides staying power. Gujarat's emission trading scheme endured because it reduced pollution, but also cut compliance cost. A program that breaks the budget will be broken by the budget. That is why ASPIRE is making affordability central to scaling, embedding cost analysis into every stage of the ILIT pathway. Take Every Child Counts, for example. At the innovation stage, it was impactful but costly. Does that mean it can't scale? Not at all. That is where ASPIRE comes in, adapting and learning through smart, evidence-based tweaks that make solutions both viable and effective. And when governments take these up at scale, costs drop further, and ASPIRE ensures impact is sustained through embedded monitoring. Recognizing this importance of tracing costs on paths to scale, we are glad to launch the ASPIRE Costing Collective, a community of practice bringing together practitioners, experts, researchers, and governments. Together, we'll explore approaches to measuring cost effectiveness, examine discounting techniques, adapt models to the Indian context, and simplify them so costs can become accessible and useful. The initial focus is going to be in education, where we already know what it takes to shift foundational outcomes, reduce dropout, and build gender equity classroom. We aim to provide governments with a way to compare options credibly and allocate scarce resources towards the greatest social return. Before I close, I'd like to share a short video about ASPIRE. It's a reminder that scaling is not about frameworks or numbers, but about people. It is carried forward by communities and frontline workers who take ownership, by government officials who push through institutional constraints, by researchers who keep evidence relevant, by CSOs that persist even when progress is slow, and funders who stay the course when results take years. It is this alliance of actors that makes scale possible.
So many policymakers across India are doing so much good work. They are innovating on new programs, they are innovating on new delivery solutions, they are innovating on how to reach more people and reach them in a more impactful way.
But with complex changes, solutions for population level scale aren't automatic, and good intentions alone aren't enough. So the question is, how do we make sure that policies we roll out work? How do we build smarter systems that learn, adapt, and deliver better outcomes? That's where ASPIRE comes in. ASPIRE was launched in 2022 by JPAL South Asia and the Veris Foundation. The idea was simple: bridge the gap between what we know works and how it can be adapted for governments to scale impact, bringing together researchers, public leaders, CSOs, and donors to adapt, learn, and integrate proven solutions into public systems. Before ASPIRE existed, partners like Co-Impact were already making a difference. They helped scale proven solutions like the graduation approach in Bihar, work that became our foundation. Since launching ASPIRE, we've seen real transformation. We've brought together funders, researchers, government departments, and community organizations. This means these solutions will last. Scaling is tough, but not impossible. ASPIRE supports programs to reach the last mile, identifying what works, adapting it with the government, building capacity, and eventually stepping back. We co-design, train, test, and build the systems needed for long-term delivery. This isn't about parallel delivery. It's about strengthening public systems to lead the way. And this is just the beginning. ASPIRE is accelerating work, from livelihoods and air quality to skills and social protection. We're building digital learning platforms, developing playbooks for scale, and launching fellowships to strengthen government capacity. To build a more equitable, resilient India, we need ideas that deliver at scale. That's what ASPIRE is all about. Let's build systems that work and last.
And to bring alive this collaborative spirit, we've created an immersive experience center here for you today. So each of these scale-ups is featured through the voices of the researchers, the NGOs, and government officials who have been part of this journey. It's our version of the living books. So as you engage, I invite you to carry prompts and ask what made this intervention stick inside the government systems, or what would it take to transfer this to a new state tomorrow? And mind you, these are questions that we would generally ask on a day-to-day basis to shape how we think about scale. And finally, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our partners. Your belief in ASPIRE has allowed us to take risks, to learn in public, and to push the boundaries of how scaling can be done. I look forward to the conversations ahead and what we can achieve together. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. I'd like to now invite Rijul, who's leading work on Every Child Counts, to present a small token of appreciation. Thank you, Rijul, and thank you again, Vijay. Before we break for tea, quick housekeeping announcements. As Vijay mentioned, the Aspire Costing Collective is now open for sign-ups. There is a flyer inside the goodie bag. It's yellow colored. It has a QR code on it. It is a voluntary platform where practitioners, donors, researchers, and experts can come together to share approaches, adapt models to the Indian context, and attempt to make cost data more accessible and useful. We hope many of you will join this first-of-its-kind community of practice. With a glimpse of 2 of our programs under your belt, at 12:30 sharp, we will begin with the Aspire Experience Center. Please be in front of your project stalls at Jacaranda 1. And just a reminder, the name tag you received at registration has a symbol on it. That symbol will guide you to your project. Our ushers wearing yellow and red lanyards will be there to support you. Before you head out, to your left as you exit the hall, there's also a photo booth. Please feel free to drop by and capture a moment with your colleagues. And with that, we now break for some refreshments. Just make sure you're at your designated project stall by 12:30, fashionably on time. Thank you.